Hey YouTube, happy Friday afternoon. Listen, I hope you guys all got Netflix. Netflix the best deal there is, in my opinion, in streaming service. Is that what it's called? I just watched this story of ARRON Hernandez. Right? They got a series on there. The series is called Killer Inside. And the title of this is The Mind of ARRON Hernandez. Now we know that that's a football player who killed 3 people. So I thought the story was fascinating. I'm not a sports fan, so I wasn't familiar with him before this incident. But I was curious, particularly I was curious about this gay aspect of the story, which people try to paint as this is the reason what made him so crazy, is he was covering up his sexuality. So I was glad that this was dispelled. It seems to me that ARRON Hernandez was a hothead. The killing started by him killing 2 innocent people and injuring another. It was basically a drive-by shooting. It was a drive-up shooting because he was in a car, pulled up to these people who he had an argument with, he had a disagreement with, and just shot them dead. Okay, so let's just break it down a little more. Okay. So they're not clear on motives in this series, but I think they do a good job of laying out exactly what happened. Odom Lloyd, he was 22 years old. He was not Odom Lloyd, I'm sorry. ARRON Hernandez, 22 years old. He was in a club, a bar. Obviously, in a club or bar, you drank. So he was obviously had been drinking. He smoked pot, from what it says here, around the clock. So he was always high on weed and on this night alcohol. Some dude was dancing in the club. This happens all the time. They got in a scuffle in the club. His friend pulled him away from the guy, and ARRON Hernandez left the bar. He waited for these guys. Now, it's not clear if he sat out the side of the bar, waited for them, or he just saw them after they left. But when these other 3 people left, these were just regular guys. They worked regular jobs, out having a good time. And they bumped into this dude, right? At a stoplight, he pulled out a gun and he shot into the car, killing 2 people and injuring another. That's how this whole thing started, right? Nothing to do with gay. Nothing to do with no CTE, brain injury, or anything like that. This is what happens when a person is a hothead in the bar. They get into a scuffle, and usually they get into a fight. Not many go and kill the people involved. But there are people who do things like this. This is not the first time we've heard of people, hotheads, killing each other over nothing. Right? Anyway, so they hid this car that he was driving in his cousin's garage, right? The only lead was the car that was used, because since they didn't know each other, he didn't know the people in the car. There was no direct contact inside of the car. There was no DNA on any of the people involved. It was car to car. The only evidence was people saw that car leaving the scene of the crime, right? The car was hidden. What was it? 3 years. This whole guy's life, they start when he's around 20, when he got drafted. And then at 22, this incident happens, right? So maybe a couple years after that, or in a 2-year period, the guy who was with him, who saw him kill these people, he made a comment, right? Now this guy's still alive, but he said something to ARRON Hernandez to set him off on this paranoid thing, right? You smoke a lot of weed, it's not unusual to get paranoid. Particularly, they said perhaps they were using PCP, which also makes you paranoid. And this guy was the only one who had personal knowledge of him killing these people, right? He said something. The guy said something about this is all brought on by the crazy shit you did back in such and such, right? Aaron Hernandez went out with this man, and when he was asleep or nodding off, he shot him in the head. The man is sitting up there with a glass eye, right? His face has been damaged from this bullet. Okay, so far, still nothing to do with no homosexuality, nothing to do with no CTE. People, hotheads don't need to be hit playing football. We see them all the time. You watch stories in the news. People go to clubs, they go to hip hop clubs or whatever, they get in a fight, and somebody gets shot. And I think it was just that simple. He was a hothead. He fired off, but he didn't like being bumped into. Maybe some bad words were exchanged, and this other guy is just all he is a witness. All right. They never go into the primary case, which is the killing of Odom Lloyd. They don't tell us what the motivation was there. From all the things, this thing appears it's a 3-part series, right? So they take time to break the whole thing down. Odom Lloyd was Hernandez's girlfriend and Odom Lloyd's girlfriend were sisters. That's how they were connected. So they hung out together a lot. If this man's smoking weed all the time, they drink. Perhaps something came out of Odom Lloyd's mouth that would make this guy think that he knew about this murder that he'd been hiding for a couple of years. Right? They don't tell us. I remember when the case first happened, we were thinking, well, maybe he knew something about him being gay or he was going to blackmail him or something like that. But Odom Lloyd, right before he was killed, he had told somebody in a text that who he's with, and he just told him the NFL, right? This is who I'm with. So he had already had reason to believe that his life was in danger. And then he must have somehow knew about this murder. I think it comes down to the original hothead execution he participated in, right? So, yeah, so Hernandez is arrested. The whole thing opens up with him being arrested. He is charged with the murder of Odom Lloyd, right? There's all kind of evidence around, all kind of video surveillance, all kind of DNA, all kind of everything to tie him to this killing. As they're investigating the killing, babies, please stop. As they're investigating the killing, they're led back to Hernandez's cousin, who's almost like a parent to him, because he doesn't get along with his mother. And early on, I think he was 16 years old, his father died, so it was the biggest influence in his life. But this cousin is where he hit the car. So as they're investigating investigating Hernandez on this murder of Odom Lloyd, they discovered the car that was used in the other murder a couple to 3 years before that, right? And this ties him to, that's the only evidence that existed, was this car. Now, why this man gonna sit up here and leave that car sitting in the garage for years? I don't understand that. Because it's kind of hard to get rid of a vehicle. Maybe he didn't anticipate killing other people and they would lead back to that house. But it was stupid to keep that much evidence around forever. Anyway, as it turns out, he ends up being convicted on the Odom Lloyd murder. But then they have the murder of these two innocent people who just bumped into him in the club. He beats that case. He gets found not guilty on both charges. I guess they're saying lack of evidence, no motive, kind of thing. But him beating that case doesn't really matter because he's already doing life on the first murder, right? Okay. Try to keep all it together. Remember, it came in 3 parts there. I got to remember all 3 parts. I watched one last night, two today. Okay. So he's in jail. He doesn't seem, from the clips that they showed us, he doesn't seem particularly bothered by the severity of this case, right? He's all tatted up. He just looks like an average guy on death row, really. But he seems to think that he will somehow. Come here, baby. Come on, come on. Bring a bun here. Get a bum over here. Yeah. Hi, people. We're getting new carpet in the hallways now. And it's been a long process. They've been working on this building for damn near 2 years. Well, October will be 2 years. So they're on the inside just as much as they were on the outside. Back to our story. Okay, so he was in jail basically 2 years. This whole thing happened from the time he was drafted to the time of his killing was only 2 years, right? Then from that time to the time he died, there's only 2 more years. Well, he died at 27. So this case was going on for, I guess, 5. Anyway. Help me if I don't get the details right. I'm suggesting you guys go and see this thing. It's very in depth. I like those true life crime things anyway. But I think they did a good job on this. So it's on Netflix. It's of course Hernandez ended up killing himself. He beat the other cases, right? After he beat the other cases, then it came out. Some reporter reported that he was homosexual, and he had been homosexual his whole life because he was having an affair with one of his classmates when he was 16, and that guy is actually in the footage. And they just had a clean kind of just a gay relationship. Only thing that complicated him being gay was that he was in the NFL, so it wouldn't behoove him to come out. But it wasn't a primary part of this thing, right? As a matter of fact, Hernandez, he had a boyfriend or someone he was hooked up with in jail. And that person also shows up at the end of this thing. Anyway, so coincidentally, I don't know if it's just a coincidence or maybe it was the straw that broke the camel's back, but some reporter reported that he was gay, and 2 days later, he hung himself. That could just be pure coincidence because he was now realizing that he was never going to get out of jail. Beating the second 2 cases didn't mean anything at all, right? They speculated that his wife will get more benefits if he kills himself. Something like that. I mean, we don't know. It all came onto him, the severity of the situation. The severity of the situation, that he was never going to get out of prison. There was no chance of it. So anyway, he killed himself. I guess it's always the kind of the end of the story, right? At first, they admonished, or his charges were dismissed because he was in appeal. So he, as a dead person, he wouldn't have no record. I don't know why that means anything. I guess it comes down to what the NFL is responsible for, as far as his wife and kid. Anyway, I don't believe that that's the reason into his life. I think it all came on him. He was in denial for most of this time. He never seemed to be. Only time when did they show him crying one time? Oh, they showed him crying when he beat the second 2 cases, right? That was short lived because when he went back to the cell, he realized that he's still not going nowhere. And then his appeals had very little chance. So they said, okay, well, he is still responsible. They changed the law. Where are they at? Are they in Boston, Massachusetts? They changed the law. So now that a person is not automatically declared innocent if they're in prison when they're appealing their case, which gave some closure to the guy, Odom Lloyd's family. You know, it's just a sad all the way around. It all started because this dude had too much to drink and he killed people. He has the capacity to kill people anyway, so maybe we shouldn't feel so bad about ARRON Hernandez. Maybe his father was too rough on him. Maybe he pushed him too hard. Who knows? Maybe it was all of it. Maybe everything. Being in the closet, marrying a woman that you knew you weren't really in. Maybe he liked the girl, but he was gay. He wasn't bisexual. He was gay. He was gay, but he was a gifted football player. Anyway, maybe it all then having the baby, he did love his child, and then never being able to be with the child again, and it all came down on him that he's stuck in prison, and he fucked up in a major way. So anyway, I thought they did a good job on the story. I recommend this story to you guys on Netflix. It's called Killer Inside. Killer Inside is a series, I guess, that they go into the mind of these people who have committed heinous crimes. The story is the mind of ARRON Hernandez, who is now dead from suicide. Okay, I did an okay job, people. Go check it out. I think you'll like it. It's a very interesting story.